Both hailed as some of the most influential rock bands in history, Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath found themselves on tour in 2005. But it wasn't all peace and harmony, as we'll find out in today's video. Established in 1996, Ozzfest was a traveling tour that consisted of the top metal acts at the time, along with Black Sabbath, who would frequently headline the tour. The 2005 incarnation of the traveling circus was playing stadiums in America with Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden co-headlining. Also on the bill that year was Mudvayne and Rob Zombie, and the tour would run from July 15th to August 20th. During Ozzfest that year, Iron Maiden frontman Bruce Dickinson was pretty open about what was bothering him, slagging off Ozzy and the corporate nature of the tour during live shows and in the press. Ahead of the tour starting in the summer of 2005, Maiden finished a show in Sweden, after which Dickinson told Kerrang! Magazine, "I'd like to go to America and say, you're very good, but you're not as loud as 56,000 effing Vikings in a football stadium." In 2006, Dickinson gave his version of events of what led to the feud escalating, recalling, "Ozzfest is a corporate rock event at which they sell the front 10 to 12 rows to corporate seats and not to kids. Most of the bands pay a lot of money to be on the Ozzfest. They get paid next to nothing. The whole way it's being portrayed as being some kind of altruistic holiday for all the bands is absolute nonsense." According to Ozzy's manager and wife Sharon Osbourne, Dickinson would consistently complain backstage, saying, and I quote, "We don't need a teleprompter and we don't need a reality show to be legit." Sharon took these as thinly veiled insults at her husband and family. It all culminated with the tour's final stop in Devore, California, and attendees reportedly told news outlets that ahead of Iron Maiden taking the stage, they heard a voice chanting on the PA system, "Ozzy, Ozzy, Ozzy." The same night, Iron Maiden's power would be cut several times during their set, and several songs into the show, Iron Maiden would be pelted with eggs, ice, bottle caps, and lighters. Obviously angered, frontman Bruce Dickinson told the audience members to break the arms of those throwing objects on stage. It was also reported during Iron Maiden's performance that Dickinson slammed festival organizers for cutting the group's power, and once again slammed Ozzy. The Orange County Register claimed that during the band's performance of The Trooper, which typically saw Dickinson waving a British flag on stage, a man wearing an American flag with the words "Don't F with Ozzy" also appeared on stage, but was removed by Iron Maiden's entourage. It was initially reported in the press that one of the bands on the Ozzfest bill that year, Bury Your Dead, were responsible for hurling objects at Iron Maiden. It got so bad that the band received death threats from angry Maiden fans, and they had to issue their own statement claiming they were not involved. Sharon Osbourne, meanwhile, would later admit to trying to sabotage Maiden's performance, including taking responsibility for cutting their power and hiring personal friends of hers, who turned out to be hospital staff that she met while she was undergoing cancer treatment, to throw objects on stage. Following Maiden's set that night, Sharon took to the stage to slam the band's behavior on tour, with some in the audience chanting Maiden's name during her rant to show their support. Sharon would claim her only issue was with Bruce Dickinson and not the rest of the band or their crew, who she admitted were great. She would admit in an interview with Howard Stern on his SiriusXM radio show that Iron Maiden was paid about $185,000 a night, and Ozzy would claim he didn't know that Dickinson was slagging him off night after night, as he was too busy getting ready for each night's show. Iron Maiden's manager, Rod Smallwood, would issue his own personal statement after the performance that read, "The scale, viciousness, and concentration of the throwing made it obvious that this was a premeditated and coordinated attack." Sharon would put out her own open letter to Iron Maiden's manager after the tour concluded that read, "I know you would love to keep talking about this because this is the most press that Iron Maiden has had in the US in 20 years, but let's move on, shall we?" She signed the letter, "The Real Iron Maiden," and accused Smallwood of fueling the tension to try and sell records and the band's upcoming shows. She would go on to claim, "I did cut the band's sound. Ozzfest is our tour. Dickinson doesn't have the manners to realize that you were invited into someone else's home or seated at their dinner table and eating their food and drinking their wine. You shouldn't talk disrespectfully about them. Otherwise, you might just get your ass handed to you. Every action has a reaction." Was Dickinson so naive to think that I was going to let him get away with talking shit about my family night after night? I don't think he realizes who he's dealing with. She would go on to say that Dickinson never discussed his concerns with both Ozzy or herself, and she would go on to say, "We had to listen to his bullshit for 5 straight weeks. He only had to suffer a couple of eggs on the head." In the years that followed, Ozzy would weigh in on the feud, saying that he personally never said anything negative about Iron Maiden or Bruce Dickinson, and that he supported his wife's actions. Speaking to The Quietus in 2010, Ozzy would even claim that Iron Maiden's bass player Steve Harris came to him and personally apologized for Bruce Dickinson's behavior. In 2017, Dickinson would tell Enemy magazine, "It's a complete storm in a teacup. I grew up listening to early Sabbath with Ozzy. Ozzy and Sabbath are icons, so that's that. End of story. The fact that I don't like reality TV shows, well, I'm not going to offer an olive branch to the Kardashians either," he'd say. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.